Hey, I think everyone out there in the gun community is aware that Colt has re-released the Python. They have two new Pythons on the market right now of different barrel lengths. And I think you're probably also aware that some of these guns are having a bit of a problem. Most notably the one in Hickok 45's video where the cylinder stops turning while he's firing the gun. Now, after watching the Hickok video multiple times, along with a couple of videos from other people multiple times who've had a similar failure, I came to the conclusion that these people are mishandling the revolvers, causing the failures. They are short-stroking the trigger, either firing the gun too rapidly without releasing the trigger all the way, or by thumbing the hammer back while they're firing a double-action gun and not releasing the trigger fully, as was the case in the Hickok video. In fact, in the Hickok video, it looks like he almost did it on purpose, because when it happens, he just stares at the gun like a moron who's never seen a cylinder not turn on a gun, where anyone who's fired a revolver any amount of time in their life knows that that can happen when you short stroke the trigger. They wouldn't be that surprised by it. They would release the trigger and fire again. He didn't do that. So makes me think he's being a little disingenuous, either that or he just doesn't know how to shoot revolvers. But even though I think that's the case, that they're mishandling these revolvers, the revolver shouldn't break over just being mishandled a few times. Anyone who shoots revolvers is going to short stroke a trigger every now and then. It's going to happen. You get overzealous, you get ahead of yourself, you short stroke the gun. And that happens. And it's not that surprising. The problem here is it seems to be doing long-term damage to the guns, making them then inoperable, or at least not reliable. That should not happen. A revolver should be able to handle being misused a few times. You should be able to do it multiple times and not have any serious damage to the gun. Because, like I said, every revolver shooter, if you shoot them a lot, is going to do it every now and then to their gun. They should be able to handle it, and obviously the new Colts can't. So what I want to do here today is I want to take a look inside the new Colts. I want to back up what I said. I want to look at the mechanisms of the new guns and compare it to the old guns. Now, I don't have one of the new guns, I have the old guns, but luckily a viewer was able to send me a picture of the internals of his gun, so we can look at the internals, how they are now, and then we will compare them to an old Colt Python, and we'll see what the differences are, and we'll see where I think the problem lies. Now, before we go any further, I want to let everyone know this video is going to be boring if you're not a gun nerd. If you're not into the mechanics of how a gun works, or you're not here to try to vindicate your hero, Hickok 45, you're probably not going to be interested in this video. It's going to be a little dry for you. That being said, let's get on with it. Okay, before we go into the actual differences here, I want to identify the main parts of the internals here that we're going to be talking about. I want to let you know what each piece is so that when we start talking about the differences later, you'll know which piece we're talking about. Now, one of the main parts we're going to talk about today is the hand. The hand is the little piece that comes up, goes forward, connects with the cylinder, and rotates it around when you pull the trigger. That's the hand. We'll also talk about the trigger and how it's slightly different now, and I don't think you need a definition of what the trigger actually is. We'll also be talking about the hammer stirrup, that little linkage between the hammer and the mainspring. And of course, we'll be talking about the mainspring itself. I think everyone knows what the mainspring does. That provides the energy for the hammer. And also, we'll be talking about the rebound lever. Now, the rebound lever might be something a lot of people aren't familiar with. The rebound lever does quite a few things. In different guns, it can do things like work the cylinder stop, work the hand, work a lot of different internal parts of the gun. It's a very important piece, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth here in a few minutes. And we'll also talk a little bit about the hammer, but not much, just a little bit. Now, so far, all of these parts will have an analogous part in the old gun. All of these parts in the new gun are in the old gun, and you'll see how they differ slightly from gun to gun, from the old ones to the new ones. But there is one part in the new gun that will not be in the old gun, and that is this one here, outlined in dark blue. That is the cylinder stop. In the old guns, the rebound lever works the cylinder stop. In the new gun, they have more of a Smith & Wesson type cylinder stop, which is in front of the trigger, and it operates independently from the rebound lever. You will not see this in the old gun. Now, before we get into the actual problems here, let's talk about how these new parts in the new gun, these new redesigned parts, how they differ from the old gun. And that will help us determine what we think the problem is with the new guns. The first piece I want to look at is the hammer stirrup. If you look at the old hammer stirrup, it's completely different than the new one. The old one appears to be a little forged piece of steel with a knob on one end, and then it's pinned to the back of the hammer. The new one appears to be a cast piece or a mem piece, but it's much bigger, much beefier, and it doesn't connect with a pin. It appears to be a completely enclosed piece that now just sets under a hook on the hammer and a hook on the mainspring, like the old pin did also. Now, I can't see this being a problem at all. I actually like the new design better. It is, like I said, a mem or a cast piece, but sometimes mem or cast pieces work better in some places, or at least work just as well as a forged piece for cheaper. So, got no problem with this. And also, the mainspring itself, if you look at the mainspring itself, in the new gun, if anything, it looks greatly improved. It looks much more sturdy, it looks beefier, it looks more solid. I'm going to say I can't see any problem with the new mainspring at all. Moving on, another piece here we're going to see that's different is the rebound lever. Now, it's not a lot different, but it is a little different. For one, no longer does it taper down and pin in at the back of the backstrap. It now is a more solid piece all the way down, has this little bulbous thing on the end, which slides into a slot on the actual grip frame. I also don't see really any issue with this piece. It looks like it's a better piece now. It looks like it's better designed. I like the way it sits in there better. It actually allows the back strap itself, the grip frame itself, to be a little sturdier, a little thicker. So I think this is a good redesign. Have no problem with this. Now, before I go on to some more changes here, I do want to point out one thing that I didn't say we were going to speak about, but I do want to point it out because some people are going to wonder what it is. If you look up here, you'll see the actual hammer stop. You'll see it is at an angle right here, whereas on the other gun, it's been completely redesigned. Don't have any problem with that, and I don't think that's important enough to talk about. Just wanted to let people know what that was. Now, let's move a little further forward in the internals here and look at the actual trigger. As you can see, the trigger has been redesigned. I like the shape of the old trigger better, but the new trigger, I don't really see any issues. I don't think the trigger is causing any problems. Now, there is one big difference here. Like I pointed out earlier, you will see that that cylinder stop mechanism is completely different in the new one. In the old one, it's not there. The new one has that much more Smith & Wesson-like cylinder stop. Now, that does raise a potential problem that could be causing issues. That means the rebound lever, which you can still see the front of here, is now doing a different job in the new gun, or at least it's doing one less job. In the old gun, it was the rebound lever that reset the cylinder stop as well as returning the trigger forward. In the new gun, the rebound lever still returns the trigger forward, but that mechanism in front of the trigger is what returns the cylinder stop to position. You'll see the spring in front of it. Because that's a redesign, I guess it's possible that Colt could have completely screwed up the new rebound lever system, but I just don't think that's very likely. In fact, of the two most likely scenarios that would cause the issues you're seeing, I think this is the far less likely of those two issues, so I don't think the rebound lever is causing the problems. As I said originally, I think the problem lies with this piece here, the new redesigned hand. Let's take a closer look at the old hand versus the new hand. First thing you're going to notice right off the bat, if you pay attention, is these are made of different types of metal. They are manufactured differently. If you look at the old hand, it appears to be a forged piece of metal that's been shaped and then pinned into place. You can see the pin. On the new piece, you don't see a pin. That's most likely because this is a cast piece or a mem piece. The pin is actually an integral part of the hand. Now, when a piece is cast or mem or whatever you want to call it, it is more important that the heat treating be perfect, the casting be perfect, etc. A small variation or mistake can make a big difference in how durable this piece will be. That would not be the same case with the forged piece in the older gun. Now, I'm not saying that mem pieces can't work properly and cast pieces can't work properly. They can, but like I said, there is a larger chance of error when you're making a mem or cast piece. But it's not just the metallurgy here that I think is the issue. I think it's also design. If you look at the tops of the two hands here, which I've outlined here, the old hand in red, the new hand in green, you'll see they're shaped totally different. The old one on the left is a much stronger design. It's the same size pretty much all the way up, it just angles out a little bit. but a good solid design that doesn't really have any inherent weak spots. No really sharp points or anything like that that could easily shear off. Whereas if you look at the new hand, it's totally different. It is very thin at the bottom, gets very wide at the top, which causes it to have a very extreme point on it, a point not present on the other gun. And I think that's the problem. When you combine that extremely thin, sharp point on the top of the hand with the fact that this is a cast or a mem piece, I think what's happening is when these people are short stroking the gun a few times, they are actually shearing off that little sharp point on the front of the hand. Once that shears off, it doesn't make reliable contact with the cylinder, doesn't rotate the cylinder properly when you pull the trigger. I think that is the issue. Now, after speaking to several Colt representatives at SHOT Show and a couple on the phone, I have found that they have been very reluctant to admit there's any issue, but a few of the ones that I spoke to did indicate to me that I'm pretty much on the nose with what I'm saying. So it looks like some of the first guns that went out had some of the first run hands in them, and maybe the first run of pieces had a little bit of an issue, a metallurgy issue, and maybe that design isn't working real well with the cast piece. So what I'm betting they're going to do with the guns they take back is they're just going to replace the hand. Whether they will replace it with just a better made cast piece or whether they will actually either redesign it a little bit or actually maybe go to a forged piece remains to be seen. In fact, it remains to be seen what the issue is completely. But like I said, I'm betting that this is what it is. And like I said, we will have to wait and see what changes they make to the gun. But what I'm thinking you're going to see is the new guns come back with a different hand.